Hello and welcome to South Asia Chat, a podcast brought to you by the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore. I'm your host Kanika Kaur, a research analyst at the Institute. In this episode, we explore the outcomes of the recent US elections and what a second term under President Trump could mean for India-US relations. With Trump's administration now holding a strong majority across the White House and Congress, we'll look at the potential shifts in the US foreign policy, especially in areas like trade, immigration, and strategic alliances. We will then discuss how these dynamics could shape the future of economic and political ties between the two nations. To help us unpack these developments, we're joined today by Professor Raja Mohan, former director of the Institute of South Asian Studies and currently a visiting research professor at the Institute. Professor is widely regarded as one of India's foremost commentators on foreign policy, bringing decades of expertise in India's strategic affairs and international relations. Thank you for joining me today, Professor.
Thank you for inviting me.
I want to start with a question that I think is on a lot of people's minds in India, and is something that we just want to briefly go through about trade and what we think is going to happen between India and US on the trade relations, considering that there is a likelihood of heightened tariffs on Indian exports following Trump's re-election. I wanted to ask you about how do you think India could effectively negotiate to regain preferential market access, especially for critical sectors like IT, pharmaceuticals, and textiles?
Look, I think trade is a very, very central question for Trump. And for India too, because US has emerged over the last 20 years as the most valued economic partner. While on the goods, US and China are close to each other. If you put goods and services together, the US is the number one trading partner, close to $200 billion a year. And unlike with China, where India has a massive deficit, $100 billion a year, with the US, India has a small surplus. So now it turns out surplus is a problem for Mr. Trump. So Mr. Trump is trying to ensure that, that no country takes simply advantage of the US without giving something in return. So any prospect of imposing 10% tariff, which is what he had said, or 20% on all countries. China was, of course, special, where he would promises to impose 60% tariffs. So I think it will hit one of the most important commercial relationship that India has. So I think we've had a fairly rough, I would say, a relationship with Trump on the trade issues in the first term. That, of course, didn't stop the rest of the relationship from moving forward. And as you pointed out, the GSP was withdrawn under Trump first term. But that is actually seems to have made no difference to in the overall volumes of trade. So I don't think India is going to insist that, give me my GSP back. I think we are in a new place. And the scale of the challenge now Trump presents demands a fresh response. A response in which India and US will have to negotiate a fresh set of arrangements for trade. This is not going to happen through global arrangements because Trump is against the WTO and the global arrangements. And Trump has signaled a clear interest in favor of bilateral negotiated managed trade, if you will. So I think India will have to find a way of give and take on the trade question and find ways to accommodate each other. During Trump's first term, there was an attempt at negotiating a mini trade deal that didn't work out. So I think there is some precedent of what they tried to do. My sense is India understands the gravity of the situation and therefore it needs to really start the process. One, internally rethinking what is the thing that we can do with the US in terms of give and take and begin to conversations with the administration that is already being formed in Washington.
Okay. Thank you for that. I think that also gives a lot of food for thought for our listeners that are interested on the trade side of things and about how bilateral arrangements between India and US could be shaped in the future and what kind of direction they could be going in. And I think it's also interesting to see that the point that you made about GSP benefits and perhaps that we don't really need to focus on that anymore and that this needs to evolve.
It'll be barking up the wrong tree. You can focus. But so I think Government of India is pragmatic enough that you're not going to ask for the restoration of GSP. But I think you've got to think bigger. and more first principles to see what is it that we can work together.
Yeah, that makes sense, to evolve the kind of demands and policies that they have with the new term. Okay, with that, I wanted to now shift gears a bit and focus on another aspect that I think a lot of Indian students and Indian working professionals are a big concern about, which is immigration. And I wanted to ask you how you think that Trump's stringent immigration policies could potentially affect the mobility of high-skilled Indian professionals, especially within the tech and engineering sectors. And secondly, how do you think India could potentially protect H-1B visa holders and also the ones that are waiting for their renewal, especially?
Look, I think, there's a lot of fear and concern in India about the immigration policies. But I think a lot of it is overstated because Indian technology professionals are going to the US because there is demand for them. That the US companies need technology talent. If they want to run their tech companies, they need qualified STEM scholars and engineers, and the US does not have enough of them. And India is one of the leading source of supply for the technical talent for the American industry. So I don't think Trump is saying, I'm going to throw out everyone. In fact, he's saying very clearly that he will encourage the legal migration while opposing illegal migration. So I think we must understand that clear difference between legal and illegal. On the illegal side, yes, India will have some problems, but I think Delhi is beginning to address them. India is in the top 3 of illegal immigrants who are crossing the border in the south. This is a new phenomenon, both in the south and in the Canadian border. So this is something India is, I think, recognizes this, that India too, in its dealing with the Western countries, is now saying we want to facilitate legitimate movement of Indian technology professionals, while we're willing to work with you on preventing or taking back illegal immigrants who are going to get deported from the US. In fact, in the last few weeks, there have been a few flights deporting Indian illegal migrants from the US to India. So I think we're on a reasonably good wicket there to deal with the illegal migration question. On the rest of it, on the legal migration, that actually the H-1B visa is a specific case. But I think India needs to also, this is my personal view, that we need to look beyond this mere H-1Bs. That what are the ways in which the US tech industry and the Indian technical talent work together to develop, long-term technological transformations in the emerging areas like AI and other fields. So, but I think our Commerce Minister, Piyush Goyal, has talked about looking beyond H-1B. It's not clear how, but I think there is an awareness H-1B is not the only way of relating Indian technology talent to the US. And finally, I would say this hype that people are going to be thrown out is misplaced. In fact, the new border czar, Homan, has said that, look, it's going to start step by step. It is not going to start with, looking for people and throw them out, which is what the Trump's opponents have argued. What the new policymakers under Trump administration, they're saying is that, look, we'll start with the worst element of it, the illegal gangs that are staying, the violent criminals that are living in the US. We'll start with removing them and then go phase by phase. So I don't think it is the H-1B visas, they're the guys who are going to be deported. And Trump himself has repeatedly said, including Indian postgraduate students, those who are in the STEM, actually they'll get work visas. So I think there is a lot of room here for cooperation between India and the US, notwithstanding the public concern.
I think a lot of our listeners would be a bit comforted hearing that, especially the ones that are either thinking of moving abroad
Every
to the
Indian
US.
engineer wants to go to the US. So.
Or the ones that are already there.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, maybe there's a chance for a renewal. But on that, I was also wondering, in terms of collaboration, do you think it's possible for India to leverage a sort of partnership over illegal immigration as well as over like legal migration, sort of like?
No, we already doing that. I mean, in fact, India has signed agreements with the UK, with Germany, what is called migration and mobility agreements, where the host countries which need technical manpower, for example, Germany, wants more engineers, Indian engineers to come. So they're willing to take professionals because their own industries are deeply going to be dependent on it. And India is saying that, look, okay, thank you, but we would also help you take back illegal migrants. So that's already the framework of India's negotiation of migration and mobility. Yes to legal, no to illegal. That is the framework already in place. And I think, as I said, we're implementing part of it in the case of the US, where US is deporting some illegal migrants and India is taking them back.
Okay, I think that's an interesting sort of like specific take on immigration as well, that for legal migrants that are looking to either move to the US are already there, that their status is safe for now, and that a lot of it is fear-mongering that we see within popular media, and that India also has some streamlined pathways to promote legal migration and prevent illegal migration. The next thing I wanted to talk about was about shifts in US foreign policy and what kind of shifts we could expect in US-China and US-Russia relations in Trump's second term, and more specifically, how we think that would affect India's strategic role in the Quad as well as within Indo-Pacific.
I mean, I don't see any major effect, actually. That you're seeing the appointments that we've seen so far that Trump has announced. I believe it is Marco Rubio who as the Secretary of State, Michael Waltz as the National Security Advisor. Just a little while ago, there was an announcement about Helget, who's for the Defense Secretary. These are all known China hawks in the United States. So the confrontation with China is not going to ease, and therefore, from the US perspective, that the role of India as an important factor in rearranging the balance of power in Asia remains, and therefore I don't see any fundamental change there. So therefore, I think the bonding between India and the US on the question of Asia, Indo-Pacific, that I think is likely to endure, given the continuing focus on the China challenge that began under Trump 1. It continued under Biden's years, and now it's expected to continue under Trump. On Russia too, I think Indians will be pleased if Trump actually negotiates an accommodation on Ukraine with Russia. So because under Biden years, I mean, I think India's reluctance to condemn Russia, its purchase of oil, have become a complicating factor. The Biden administration was careful not to let the Russia differences undermine the relationship. And if actually US and Russia find a way to rethink their relationship, find a solution to the question of Ukraine, it really eminently suits India, because India would want to see US and Russia get along. It would want to see Russia and Europe get along, so that for India then Russia's conflict with the West or its deepening partnership with China, which is a problem for India. So therefore I think in India, Russia that is in reasonable relationship with the US is welcome for India. But the question is, there is a lot to be done. It's not at all clear if Trump's intent to negotiate a deal with Putin will actually work out, given the complexity of the issues at hand, the demands of Putin, and the importance for the US of not abandoning Ukraine completely. So it's going to be a hard game. But I think India is not going to be troubled by the effort to negotiate a deal between that. If Trump wants to negotiate a settlement between Russia and Ukraine, India will be very happy to welcome that.
Okay, thank you for that line of thought, because I think that also makes a lot of sense for India, that if Trump is to negotiate a deal with Russia, it's likely to ease the pressure that the Biden administration put on India, however minimal, on isolating Russia as well. And I think that also makes sense that the aim to contain China within Indo-Pacific is still the impetus to form alliances with India in the region as well. But about this, I was also wondering on how alliances like the BRICS would work in this situation, because we recently had the BRICS summit in late October, and We had India have like new strategic partnerships with countries like Iran, with the the port situation. And I was wondering about what would happen in terms of Trump's leadership in respect to India engaging within the BRICS, because Biden seemed to turn a sort of blind eye to it as long as you are helping contain China.
See, BRICS so far is really a talk shop. So I don't think BRICS actually, for all the aspirations, it is about to undermine the US-led order. So I don't think that at this point BRICS threatens the Americans, and Americans understand the contradictions between India and China in BRICS, the contradictions between Saudi Arabia and Iran in the BRICS. They understand the difficulties between Egypt and Ethiopia. So it's not as if these 9 countries are such a happy, jolly bunch that they're really going on an adventure to undermine the American system. That's a Russian aspiration. That's probably a Chinese aspiration. I don't think everyone else wants to see that happen in the BRICS itself. But everyone wants some room to negotiate, to bargain with the US. That is the principal purpose of BRICS, even for the Russians and the Chinese. They're dying to cut a deal with the Americans, each one separately. So the BRICS is a useful way of mobilizing some pressure on the Americans and say, look, give us a deal. So I think India is quite clear. It is in the Quad and the BRICS. But I think what's happening in the Quad is far more consequential than what's happening in the BRICS. So I don't see that as a fundamental contradiction. I think real challenge for India is really that it needs to convince Trump, look, it is a reciprocal relationship. That is, Trump gives India something, India must give something back to Trump. So as long as we can convince him that, look, it's based on give and take, it is on the basis of reciprocity, then I think India will be in a good wicket. And that's where India is different from the European powers who want America to defend them. But at the same time, but they don't want to do too much of their own effort because it's quite comfortable to have someone else do the dirty work for you. But Trump is saying, no, not anymore. Either you pay more for what I do or you spend your own resources. So India is not a formal ally like the Europeans or the Japanese or the Koreans. So India doesn't have that kind of a problem of the shift in the way Trump is looking at alliances.
I also wonder if, just thinking out loud here, if it's possible for India to leverage its strategic partnerships in the BRICS for a better relationship with the US.
No, now you're not leveraging against the Americans anymore because your stakes with the Americans are so high.
Mm-hmm.
The entire, as I said, trade, much of India's trade is with the US, number one, Europe and the Anglosphere. So it is not that our trade with China, as I said, is a deficit of $100 billion. Russia is again a deficit. Russia's trade has grown. So it's not that BRICS offers you an economic leverage against the... it's only in the political realm, to limit some of the American unilateralism. But I think for India, the stakes with the US and the West have dramatically grown. So I don't think India is going to play the Russia card against the US, and I think that's what the Chinese and the Russians might want to do with the rest of us. But I don't think India wants to play that kind of a game.
That's really interesting that perhaps BRICS offers at best an alternative rhetoric, but not really a pragmatic.
In long, distant future, if it.
Yeah, hopefully, maybe someday it offer an actual objective alternative. Next, I wanted to bring it back to Narendra Modi again, considering that, we explored that there's not much that you can leverage with the US. Trump is going to have a more transactional nature. He's very reciprocal about it. So I was wondering what you think about how could Prime Minister Modi's, for instance, really swift outreach to Trump post his election win help establish a strong base for India-US relations? And also, what, in your opinion, should India prioritize for alignment at first? Maybe perhaps in his first 100 days that we push for?
Look, I think the fact that India and Mr. Modi had good relationship with Trump in the first term, there was this big rally in Gujarat that Trump came. It still talks about how big the rally was. And then there was a second rally in Houston where Mr. Modi announced Ab Ki Baar Trump Sarkar. So I think that is, it didn't work out last time. But I think, in fact, So there is a rapport, there is a record of working together. Barring the question of tariffs, where Trump has serious questions about India's role, that it doesn't give enough access to the Americans, the rest of the relationship really progressed very well under Trump. I mean, you had the elevation, the revival of the Quad, the framing of the Indo-Pacific, the expansion of military security cooperation under Trump's first term, which actually enhanced under Biden years. So I don't think policy-wise there is a big beyond the question of the trade issue, which I think India will be open to negotiate. See, reciprocity is an important thing. In people say transactional seem like a bad word, but that's how the world works. So it's better to be clear and transactional, that you give something to get something, rather than this framing, we are in love, we are high values binders, and that kind of nonsense. That's really for the bees. That even in a marriage there is an element of give and take. I mean, it's not that it is completely ethereal relationship. So I think that India understands it. Transactional is good. There's no mystification of the relationship. So it's easy to negotiate as long as you're capable of offering something and demanding something. That is, you give something, you take something, and you negotiate. So I think India will be in a good place. What's interesting for me, though, was the call between Trump and Mr. Modi was really one of the first 3 calls he made. So it's not as if, he had to wait in a long list. Actually, it's very interesting that Trump was attacking the British Labour Party for saying that, look, they were trying to undermine his election. So I think India is in a very, very good place, in a better than some of America's old friends like Germany or UK. So I don't see that being a problem. My sense is the real question as we look forward is there is the Quad summit planned in India, whether Trump will want to continue with the Quad in the same form. And if he wants to continue, will he give us a date to come to India quite early on? So in a way, that will be very good if Trump shows up in Delhi early on in his term. Then I'm sure Delhi will roll out a massive set of deals and agreements so that you start on a good note. So that's what I would suspect the preparations will go. But the policy questions, whether Trump wants to sustain the Quad, and that remains to be seen.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I think that also gives a lot for our listeners who are based in India to think about, that there is a foundation for a solid relationship already between Trump and Modi, and that there are their leadership styles are also a bit similar. They have previous meetings to bank upon. Clearly, by the call, it seems like there's an affinity to each other as well. But what's going to make the difference is the clarity that we have, like as India, to negotiate and determine what we prioritize and what we need from the US in return. So what we offer to them and what we can get back in return, realistically speaking. So thank you so much for sharing your insights, Professor.
Thank you. Nice talking to you. Yeah.
You're listening to the South Asia Chat. To learn more about our work, please visit us at isas.nus.edu.sg. You can also get your updates through social media. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.